When we finished our watch training, I mean, we really bored the hell out of that petty officer that was there. I remember that. He couldn't wait for us to be done. I'm sure he didn't want to be there.
Gonzo, the Coast Guard Years, Boot Camp, Episode 8, Week 6 and Duty Stations.
Following my epic butt whooping, sometime later that week, I was called in for standard personnel inspection. That included, a uniform inspection, general Coast Guard knowledge, and a few other things. When your name was called, you have about 10 to 15 minutes to prepare. And when they called my name, like right after that, 3 or 4 other recruits came up to me and started getting me squared away. And by that, I mean, these dudes were sitting there taping me off to get the lint off of my uniform or whatever lint there might have been, helping me tuck in my shirt appropriately, the Coast Guard way. They do this like weird sort of reef tuck thing. It's kind of neat. It basically makes your shirt not look baggy when in fact it really is baggy. They also were making sure that my gig line was straight. Your gig line is that line that your shirt sort of makes where the buttons are, the zipper and your belt buckle all form one straight line. The funny thing is, I still do that today. Whoever knows me and you see me in my day job, if you ever look at my shirt, my belt buckle, and the little zipper part of my pants, but don't look down at my zipper, it's all in one straight line. At least I try to keep it that way. So while people are helping me get my uniform squared away or making sure it was squared away, someone else was drilling me on the general orders from the Coast Guardsman handbook, the helmsman, and some other like regular sort of stuff like who the officer of the day was, a training duty officer, and that kind of stuff. There were also dudes that were making sure that my shoes were nice and shiny and that my belt buckle was nice and shiny. That was awfully nice of them. I was feeling sort of like a rock star, maybe a movie star or something like that. Although I was pretty sure they were just worried about me because I was an idiot and they were trying to get me dressed so I wouldn't be treated like an idiot. Anyway, who knows? What I did know is that the recruits who I had gotten to know wanted to make sure that I didn't get my ass kicked again. I really must have looked like total shit that night when I came in with the lights off. I mean, think about it. I must have been so ugly. Nobody wanted me even when the lights were out. That's bad. Anyway, okay, so I'm just winding out. After a quick, sort of beauty makeover, I went out to the Hall of Pain, the quarterdeck, where I got beat the other night, or where I was told to perform self-harm on myself, or whatever we want to call it. I was there with 4 of the 5 recruits, so we were all lined up. I wasn't the first one that our company commander inspected. I think I was the second one. And when he came up to me, just like before, he was eyeing me up and down. He asked me a few questions that thankfully I knew the answers to. And while he's standing in front of me, he was making some sort of comment, something like he thought I was the recruit that had his shit in one sock before the other night. Shit in one sock? Like, I didn't even know what that meant. But seriously, that saying today it doesn't make sense to me at all. Who puts shit in a sock? You know what? If that was a Coast Guard thing, then I had no idea what kind of weird ass trip I was taking. He moved on to the next guy, a tall redheaded guy. He also was one of the squad leaders, the redheaded guy that is. And he was also one of the poor guys that got the shit cranked out of him on our very first day that we met our CC. Oh, that poor guy. I remember him. He was sweating bullets and face was all red. And he was mad. However, Mr. Redhead didn't fare so well when he was getting his inspection. He didn't know his general orders, or at least the one that he got asked. And some of the other questions you get asked, like who the training duty officer was and all that kind of stuff. He didn't know any of those questions. So while he's standing there, all of a sudden, the company commander's like, give me your demerit slip. So he undoes his pocket and Bang, zoom, he sees an Irish pennant on the guy's button. The guy said something to the company commander, and before you know it, Mr. Redhead is on the floor in a push-up position. And also that he was going to be joining me at IT that night. Our company commander probably could have thought of any reason to crank me, but he didn't. He saved that for Redhead. Thank God. As I mentioned in the previous episodes, I had become an IT ninja in boot camp. This wasn't something to be particularly proud of, but it helped me get ready for the week 6 physical fitness tests. It was during this week they tested you on how many push-ups you could do, pull-ups, sit-ups, your running, and the swim. Oh, and as it turns out, I was only in remedial swimming for one session. They figured out that I actually could, more or less swim and not drown. It was also about this time when we were all thinking about our first duty station or where we were going to be going. When you got to decide or got to pick where you were going, you did it in the order in which you were ranked in the company. I'm not so sure I know how they actually ranked you. I vaguely sort of remember it had something to do with how well you did in your, academics in there. We had lots of classroom work that I haven't even talked about any of that. But I'll actually mention one of them in the next episode. We'll briefly mention it. But anyway, so your classroom performance, that kind of stuff, you got some scores on that. You got some input from the company commander. Good Lord, help me. And you also like the number of demerits you had, so that kind of counted against you. And also, depending on how well you did on the physical fitness test, has also helped your ranking. At this point, I was pretty confident that I was going to be okay for the physical fitness tests. I knew I'd at least meet the minimum requirements. I mean, I knew that much. As much time as I'd spent in IT, I could do a few push-ups, let me tell you. The interesting thing about the physical fitness tests was that every recruit, I believe, or almost every recruit in Victor Company did 100 sit-ups for their sit-up test. Our fitness trainer, he had some crazy obsession with doing sit-ups, so he wanted to make sure we could all max out on it, and 100 was the max we were allowed to do. So a lot of us, if not all of us, did the 100 sit-up max. Another place where a lot of us were going to get points or could have gotten points was the run. Seaman recruits, Mr. Alternative, who I will call Morrissey, he also did really well. He didn't tell anyone till that day that he used to be a cross-country racer in high school. So the whole distance running thing, that was like his total jam. We had gone on company runs before. So we ran in formation a lot. We ran out and about off base, around Cape May. It was kind of cool, actually. Morrissey didn't tell anybody or act like, he was like this elite runner or anything like that. When we did the run, the run was supposed to be, I think it was like 1.5 miles, and you had around 15 minutes to do it. This dude Morrissey, I remember, did it under 10 minutes. He damn near sprinted the whole thing. So he came in first in our group, or our company. I did it in just a few seconds over 10 minutes. Not nearly as good as this dude, but it was enough that I came in second. So I picked up a lot of points. I forgot what the points were and how it maxed out, but I know I maxed out on the run. So that was cool. The run itself wasn't that horrible. I had a soccer coach that was much, much worse. After like 2 hours of soccer practice, you had to run 12 laps right after practice. And the dude said you had like 18 minutes to do it. That's basically like a 6-minute mile. So you were almost sprinting the whole way. It was miserable. Yeah, it was really bad. Maybe my math is off. If you're interested now, my mile is about 11 minutes or 11 and a half minutes now, which is pretty much just, a really fast walk. For the rest of the 6-week week 6 fitness test, I did okay. I did more than your average number of pull-ups than some of the other guys in the group. I was really surprised that I was able to do more push-ups than half the group that was there. Anyway, I probably couldn't do nearly as many now, if any at all. That's sad. But, I did okay with the other stuff, the push-ups and the swim, all that stuff was okay. So just not nearly as impressive as the run I did and the sit-ups. So after all that was sort of done, that was like a huge weight off of everyone's shoulders. You had passed the final physical fitness test. So barring some other catastrophe, you were going to be graduating the fourth week in November. But before you graduated, you needed to pick out what your first duty station was going to be. Again, it was based on your ranking, how you picked, what order you picked in. I remember, not exact number, but I was in the top 25 of the people in my company. We had around 70 at this point. We had picked up a handful of other recruits that had been reverted from a company ahead of us. That wasn't uncommon. Apparently, people got reverted quite often. You never wanted to be reverted, though. We had a few in our company that got reverted to a company behind us. I mean, that kind of sucks. We're all in this building. I forgot what building it was. It might have been the first building that we were in the first night we had talked to our company commander, met our company commander. I don't know. I sat down with everybody else, and the interesting thing was I didn't actually pick my first duty station with the rest of the company. Before you get to Cape May, or before I had gotten to Cape May, I was able to get a guaranteed geographical location. What that means is my ASVAB score was high enough that they said, hey, dude, why don't you just pick, a place, area you want to go before you go to boot camp. So I didn't really know what a kind of big deal that was until I got to boot camp and realized that of 70-some people, there was only 3 of us that had a guaranteed geographical location. It's not to say we are smarter than everyone. I clearly wasn't, based on some of the stupidity I had shown. The geographical location I had picked was an area between Maryland and Florida, so all the way down the East Coast. That's a pretty broad area. And if there was a billet for a Coast Guard seaman apprentice, which is what I was going to be when I graduated boot camp, I could pick one of those places and they would send me there. So while everyone else was busy, in another room, I am sitting with these 2 other recruits. We had gone to a different room and we were meeting with, I think it was the Coast Guard Chief Petty Officer. It might have been a warrant officer. I'm really vague on that. Basically, I felt like we were skipping the line and maybe getting a better deal or a better bill or a choice. I don't know. Anyway, I felt like I was getting over. When it was my turn to pick, I had asked about Key West, Florida. It wasn't even given to me as an option. I just asked. And the guy that was there said, sure, okay, there is a spot in Key West, Florida. And he said, do you happen to know anyone from the Coast Guard cutter Lipan? And I just kind of looked at him and kind of casually, nonchalantly said, I know the commanding officer of the Lipan. It seemed like an innocent thing to say because I did know him. The guy asked me a direct question. I wasn't going to lie about it, but I probably should have. And now you're probably wondering, why in the world did he even ask that? Well, the Coast Guard cutter Lipan was actually home ported in Key West, Florida. And somewhere along all this mess, somebody from the cutter Lipan, who I think I found out it was the executive officer, the XO, had called. It might have been like their senior admin officer. I don't remember. But anyway, someone had called from the Lipan to the Cape May and said that there was a billet or a spot for me on the Lipan. And as it turns out, because they had gotten the week wrong that I was graduating, that they ended up giving it to somebody else, which is okay. It was a billet for a fireman, for somebody that works in the engine room, and I definitely wasn't going to do that. No way, now I'm not a grease monkey. This particular little story was going to end up being a little bit of a point of contention later for a few folks, and I'll get to that a bit later. So after we'd picked our spots, the other 2 recruits and I went back to the room with the rest of our company. They were still picking their places, and it was kind of interesting to hear where they were going. People were getting small boat stations, And at the time, I had no idea what a small boat station was. I didn't even know what I was going to be doing in Key West, Florida. I knew I was going to something called Group Key West. I had no idea what a Group Key West was. I just knew it was Key West. And because I knew the commanding officer of that one Coast Guard cutter, I knew I was in pretty good shape. I mean, I had known that guy since I was in elementary school. After the duty stations had all been picked and some people were happy, some people weren't. I mean, that's how life is, right? I mean, I was more or less happy. I got Key West, Florida. But if I'm being honest, I had no idea where Key West, Florida was. I mean, I knew it was in Florida. I knew it was an island. And I think I knew it was sort of close to Cuba. But in relation to the map in the United States, I had no idea where Key West was. I was clueless. I mean, you sort of got the idea I was clueless from the first episode. Still clueless. We had gotten back to Healy Hall, and we were going up the stairs to the second floor, and I ran into my company commander in the infamous quarterdeck, or the place as I refer to call it, the Hall of Pain or Shame. Just depends on what your preference is. So he had a little I think he had a bit of a smirk on his face. And he asked me where I was going to be stationed, and I remember I hesitated, but it came out, "Sir, Group Key West, sir," or something like that. I remember his eyes got sort of big, and literally he said, "How the hell did you get that?" So without going into details, I just mentioned that I had a guaranteed location. And he shook his head and just walked away. And I remember I was the one with the little smile on his face when he walked past me. I was lucky. I don't think he was really anxious for me to get what he considered a prime spot. So the other recruits of Victor Company, we were sitting in our squad bay, kind of, milled around. We were talking about duty stations again. And so Mr. Nicaragua and Rafa and I sat together. Nicaragua was going to New York City, and I think it was Support Station, New York. And Rafa was going to Isla Morada in the Florida Keys. Funny thing is, though, we were actually only a few hours apart from each other. We were pretty close, at least in distance-wise, when we got out. But Rafa and I wouldn't meet up again till like over a year later. He and I would both end up in New York City, and we actually caught up with Mr. Nicaragua, and I'll be talking about that in a few episodes from now, maybe quite a few episodes from now, because there's a big year gap before I saw those two again. But it was kind of funny though. So we were all, pretty much excited and maybe nervous a little bit too, because we knew boot camp was ending, and we were going to be leaving one routine and have to go to some other place and learn the ropes again. And, it's just always the new thing, right? I mean, there were a few other things we needed to do in boot camp. We were almost done. We still had to go to the range and get qualified on M16 and a 45 pistol. So that was kind of cool. I had never actually shot a pistol before till then. Then they had some last minute, sort of dental screenings and health screenings just to make sure that you weren't leaving there with in any worse shape than when you got there. I did have to go to dental, I think 2 more times. I know one time was to get a cavity filled. The other time I'm not sure. So maybe I'm just, on crack or something like that. I don't know. We also had to do some basic seamanship training too. It was like one of the last big ticket items we had to do. I believe that on the other side of the training center is where we did this. There was a Coast Guard 41-footer small boat. They were using that for training. So in 1987, the 41 was like the all-around utility boat for the Coast Guard. I mean, it was the workhorse. It would do everything. They used it for safety patrols. They used it for search and rescue, or SAR, S-A-R, as they call in the Coast Guard. I mean, it did everything. They towed people with it. I mean, it was a nice boat. As part of our seamanship training, we had to learn how to stand a watch, lookout watch, actually. So sometime in the middle of the night, it was late. I know it was after taps. 3 or 4 of us were told to get up, and there was on a particular schedule. We marched over to the other side of the base where this 41-footer was. We basically took turns standing on top of the boat, and there was a petty officer there, training us on how to be a lookout. I mean, it was just the basics, nothing particularly interesting. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing up there. I had no idea. I heard the other dudes saying stuff, so I just figured they weren't getting yelled at for saying the stuff they were doing, and so I was going to do it, so it was going to be pretty easy. The guy did go over a few things we had to know. So you had to know how to identify targets, or not so much identify them, but be able to communicate their location relative to the ship, or in this case, the boat. So when it was my turn to stand up there, we were right next to a parking lot. So when people would walk by, I'd say, "Hey, there's a blah, blah, blah flange head." Flange head's what they call recruits. And that was a nice way of talking to recruits. I'd say that, or there'd be a stray bird, or I see a plane, overhead. And so you'd have to give general locations of these things. Now, pretty sure I might have this all wrong. But the general gist is that when you saw something, you needed to report it. And the reporting sort of went like this: "Bridge, look out." And the bridge would normally say, "Look out, bridge." And then you'd say, "Bridge, look out, aircraft, 33 degrees, starboard, position angle 3. And essentially, position angle 3 was how many fists you could make from like the horizon, and you count to the many times that you saw where the plane met. So I know I'm not describing that well, but you might get the idea. And so the dude would know that relative to the ship, he would look around 33 degrees, which was like off the port bow, and he'd look up, like 3 fists high, and there would be your plane. Something like that. So anyway, there was a standard way of communicating stuff, and but I haven't done this in a long time. I mean, I was only a lookout for a short period of time anyway, so I could totally have this wrong. But the times I was a lookout, the ship I was on, it's really kind of an interesting thing. If you've never actually been out on a ship in the middle of the night where there's no lights at all, and we're up on the O3 deck, and the O3 deck is the third deck above the main deck. It's quiet. It really is a surreal feeling. Kind of comforting, actually. Anyway, I'll talk about some lookout stuff in the future. And I'm just getting all weird and nostalgic now, and we don't want to do that. When we finished our watch training, I mean, we really bored the hell out of that petty officer. That was there. I remember that. He couldn't wait for us to be done. I'm sure he didn't want to be there. But hey, it's a job, right? I'm sure he didn't know he'd be doing that when he joined the Coast Guard. So we were back at the barracks, and like I said, it was like an hour or 2-hour watch. We went back. We got a few hours of sleep before we had to get up at 5 o'clock again. So by week 6, I have to say that they didn't wake you up in sort of any abrupt manner any longer. I mean, you got into a routine. You woke up at 5 o'clock. You put on your sweats, and you headed out to morning PT. So PT in the Coast Guard was sort of like normal calisthenic type stuff. You did do some push-ups, and you usually ended it with a run around the parade field. Like many weird sort of routine things we got into, you just got used to all the exercising. We woke up, we either got cranked in our squad bay, or we woke up, got into our sweats, we went outside and did PT. By the time you were done with PT, it was like 5:45 in the morning. They usually gave you about 5 minutes to get upstairs, get changed into your uniform of the day, which was normally these dark blue working blues. And then we back out in formation again. That was sort of our routine for weeks. The funny thing, around week 6 is also about the time that most of the company commanders knew me. it's because I was an IT ninja. I was always at IT for like 2 weeks, I think, maybe 3 weeks. So the night before, I remember that, or one night, I shouldn't say the night before. One night there was Chief Clicks. He was the guy that I mentioned that had the little metal things on his shoes that clicked when he walked. So he was a training duty officer one night, and man, that dude, we were at IT one night, and I remember it was cold because by this time it was like, early November in Cape May, New Jersey. So we're in our sweats, and so we're out of the parade field, on the concrete track around it. This dude, Chief Clicks, and some of his other company commander friends were sitting on the stairs to go into Healy Hall, and this dude, he had a whistle. So Clicks would sit there with his whistle, and he would blow it, and when the first time he blew it, we started running. And the next time he blew it, you have to drop and give him push-ups until he blew the whistle again. So he'd blow the whistle and you'd jump up and you'd get like 6 feet, and this crazy sadistic bastard would blow the whistle again, and then you'd drop to the ground, you'd do more push-ups, you'd get like 5 or 20 out or something like that, and you'd jump back up again, and again, just as you started running, he'd blow the whistle again. And when you've got like 10 or 15 people trying to run in formation, but each time you start getting into a groove, he makes you stop and you do push-ups. And this went on and on and on and on because you're out there for an hour, and that's what we did mostly, was just run around this parade field, running, doing push-ups, get up, running, doing push-ups. It was, if you can imagine like the Keystone Cops or Laurel and Hardy or Abbott and Costello doing all of this stuff. And if none of that makes sense, for those of you who watch a lot of zombie movies, just imagine it's just a whole horde of zombies sort of struggling around and then falling to the ground and getting back up. And if you don't know about The Walking Dead, just imagine that there's 10 or 15 or 20 drunks trying to run a race around a track, and they'd get like 10 or 15 feet and they'd all stumble. That's sort of how we looked like. And I know that was like sort of a long-winded explanation, but it was really embarrassing to watch that. I mean, he just blew that whistle. That dude was he was mental. I think he really enjoyed this crap. By the time we were done, IT was just about over, and we were all standing in formation, and Chief Clicks remembered me from the other night when I had said the wrong thing to my company commander, and he got into my face, and he's sitting there yelling a bunch of stuff, and he makes me drop and do some more push-ups, and he's sitting there yelling at me, and then I stand back up again, and he's got his face is right in front of mine. I remember he stunk. I mean, he really stunk. And mostly it was his breath. I mean, he smoked. And so his breath stunk like cigarettes and coffee. I mean, he was just a hot mess. He was a typical Coast Guard chief, except he was kind of thin. Most Coast Guard chiefs had a big old belly. But anyway, that's a whole different story. So back to the following morning, when I was kind of mentioning about morning PT, one of the mornings, that very next morning, Clicks was doing the morning PT. And when PT was just about over, he pulled out the damn whistle, and we all dropped to the ground and started doing push-ups. And then that son of a bitch walked up to me, and he started yelling at me. But he was trying to have a conversation with me when he was yelling. And he's like, "Hey, Gonzalez, you remember my whistle, don't you? You got to hear a lot of that last night. I'm going to check my schedule, find out when I got TDO again. Hell, I might just come back in the evening so you can get more of it." And yes, I did have IT that night, and thankfully, Clicks did not come around. I really hated that fucking whistle. It was horrible. For those of you that were in boot camp around the same time I was, you had to have run into Clicks. That dude, man, he was a piece of work. Man. And honestly, I think of all the company commanders that were there, he was probably the one in the least physically fit conditions. I mean, he was a mess. But I don't know. I wouldn't see Clicks again for IT till like the latter part of week 7. And but I wasn't in IT that night. But I was marching with the rest of my company, and there were a whole bunch of other recruits, like a ton of recruits, all out in the parade field. And I heard Clicks was out there. If you're wondering, you're probably right. It was my fault that they were all there.
You've been listening to Gonzo, the Coast Guard Ears, written and produced by Tim Gonzalez, and I'm Nicholas Gonzalez, the voice guy. Join us Monday for another episode of Gonzo, the Coast Guard Ears.